Disney built your childhood like a magic trick and forgot to hide the fingerprints. Watch closely, because once you notice these details, Disney movies and parks stop looking innocent and start looking suspiciously genius. 1. Disney's castles are basically legal brainwashing with prettier roofs. Cinderella Castle at Magic Kingdom looks enormous, but it is actually 189 feet tall, not some medieval skyscraper dropped in Florida. The trick is forced perspective. The higher parts of the castle are built smaller, so your brain politely lies to you and says, "Wow, that thing must be huge." Main Street USA plays the same game. Buildings subtly shrink as you move toward the castle, making the castle feel farther away and grander, like Disney personally hacked your eyeballs. It is not just architecture, it is emotional manipulation with gift shops. And the funniest part is that most visitors never notice. They just stand there, holding a $17 snack, taking photos of a castle that is quietly catfishing them in broad daylight. Disney did not build a castle. They built an optical illusion with fireworks. 2. Hidden Mickeys started as tiny inside jokes, then accidentally became a full-time sport for adults with annual passes. Disney's own D23 notes that Hidden Mickeys began in the 1980s as subtle silhouettes placed by Imagineers inside attractions. Usually it is the classic three-circle Mickey shape, slipped into walls, ride details, props, carpets, paintings, or scenery where normal people would just see decoration. But Disney fans are not normal people. They became detectives. Suddenly, every plate, bubble, rock, shadow, and suspiciously round stain was definitely Mickey. Disney created a secret visual language, and guests turned it into a treasure hunt that never ends. That is the genius. You can ride the same attraction 10 times and still feel like you discovered something new. It is nostalgia, obsession, and pattern recognition all wearing mouse ears. Somewhere, an Imagineer hid 3 circles as a joke, and now grown adults squint at wallpaper like it owes them money. 3. Magic Kingdom has a hidden underground world because apparently even fantasy needs a service entrance. Beneath the park are the famous utilidor tunnels, used so people and supplies can move around without breaking the illusion upstairs. Disney's own Keys to the Kingdom tour describes them as underground utilidor tunnels that let cast members and supplies travel beneath the park unseen. That means while guests are above ground believing in fairy tales, someone below is probably moving trash, costumes, equipment, or lunch with military-level efficiency. This was partly about protecting the story. Disney did not want a Frontierland cowboy casually strolling through Tomorrowland like he got lost on his way to a barbecue. The tunnels help keep each themed area feeling separate and believable. It is brilliant, slightly creepy, and very Disney. Even the backstage area has choreography. The magic is not just what you see, it is everything Disney works extremely hard to make sure you never see. Keep watching because Disney's cutest details are usually hiding the weirdest secrets. For Disney pumps specific smells into parts of its parks, and once you know that, you'll never trust your own nose again. You probably think you're smelling fresh popcorn because someone nearby just bought a bucket. Sometimes that's true. Other times, Disney has quietly helped your brain reach that conclusion. The company has long used scent technology, often associated with a system called Smellitzer, developed by Disney Imagineering, to release carefully chosen aromas in certain attractions and walkways. Walk past Main Street, USA, and the smell of vanilla or baked treats seems to appear exactly where it should. Wander near a confectionery, and suddenly you're convinced you need caramel popcorn despite eating lunch 20 minutes ago. It isn't an accident. Disney understands that smell is closely tied to memory and emotion. So, instead of simply decorating a space, they make you feel it. The result is incredibly effective. Years later, people don't just remember the rides, they remember the scent of cookies, pirate water, or fresh candy drifting through the air. Disney didn't settle for building a theme park. They built a place that quietly convinces your nose to become part of the storytelling, and your wallet usually follows right behind. 5. Every Disney employee is part of a performance, even if they're sweeping the sidewalk. Disney doesn't call its workers employees inside the parks. They're called cast members, because the entire resort is treated like one giant stage production. Guests are the audience, themed lands are the sets, uniforms are costumes, and every interaction is expected to support the story. That means the person selling ice cream, directing traffic, or cleaning the pavement isn't just doing a job. they're staying in character. One of the most famous examples is that cast members are trained never to point with one finger because, in some cultures, it's considered rude. Instead, they use two fingers or gesture with an open hand. It seems like an incredibly small detail until you realize millions of guests notice these subtle gestures without ever thinking about them. Disney spends enormous time training people to create a consistent experience where kindness feels effortless, even though it's carefully practiced. Behind the scenes, it requires discipline that rivals live theater. The funny part is that guests leave saying, "Everyone was so naturally friendly," when in reality they just witnessed one of the most carefully rehearsed performances on Earth without ever realizing they had bought a ticket to it. 6. The clocks on Main Street seem ordinary until you notice they almost never make you feel rushed. Disney has always understood that people spend more money when they're relaxed and enjoying themselves, so the parks are designed to encourage exploration instead of constantly reminding guests about time. You'll notice surprisingly few large, obvious clocks compared to airports, train stations, or shopping malls. That's intentional. Instead of making visitors stare at the time every few minutes, Disney fills the environment with music, movement, parades, storefronts, and tiny details that naturally keep your attention focused on the experience. Hours begin to disappear without you realizing it. You tell yourself you'll stay another 30 minutes, then suddenly fireworks are starting, and you've somehow walked 8 miles without thinking about it. It's a masterclass in environmental design rather than manipulation. Disney isn't hiding time. They're giving your brain something much more interesting to pay attention to. Before you know it, you've ridden another attraction, bought another snack, and taken 50 more photos. The clock didn't vanish. It simply stopped being the most interesting thing in front of you, which is exactly what Disney hoped would happen. 7. Walt Disney hated seeing trash on the ground, so he literally measured how far people would carry it. One of Disney's most famous design stories comes from Walt himself. Before planning Disneyland, he reportedly watched guests at amusement parks to see how long they held onto empty cups, wrappers, and napkins before dropping them. His conclusion was surprisingly practical. Most people would carry trash only about 30 steps before looking for somewhere to throw it away. So Disneyland was built with trash cans placed roughly every 30 steps throughout the park. It's one of those tiny details almost nobody notices because it quietly works exactly as intended. Instead of constantly reminding guests to be cleaner, Disney simply made it easier to do the right thing. Today, visitors often comment on how unusually clean Disney parks feel compared to many other crowded attractions. That's not because millions of people suddenly become tidier when they walk through the gates. It's because the environment was designed around predictable human behavior. Walt wasn't trying to change people. He accepted that people are lazy, then designed a park clever enough to work with that reality instead of fighting against it. Sometimes the smartest magic trick is just putting the trash can exactly where someone is about to need it. 8. Disney plants trees that make entire lands feel older than they actually are. Walk through Adventureland or Frontierland, and everything seems like it's been there forever. The buildings look weathered, the paths feel established, and even the trees appear ancient. But many of those landscapes were carefully planned years before guests ever arrived. Disney's landscape architects intentionally selected, relocated, and arranged mature trees to create the feeling that these worlds had existed long before opening day. In some cases, large trees were moved onto the property during construction because young saplings would have ruined the illusion. Imagine spending billions creating a pirate fort only to surround it with tiny little trees that look like they came from a suburban garden center. It would instantly break the spell. Disney understands that people don't consciously study every branch or leaf, but their brains notice when something feels authentic. That's why landscaping is treated as storytelling rather than decoration. Every tree, shrub, and flower helps convince you that you're exploring a living place instead of a carefully engineered attraction. It's remarkable how much work goes into creating something guests barely think about, which is usually the clearest sign that Disney's illusion is working perfectly. 9. Disney hides speakers almost everywhere because silence can ruin the illusion faster than bad acting. Music in Disney parks feels natural, almost like it's simply floating through the air. That's because speakers are carefully concealed throughout buildings, gardens, rooftops, lampposts, and themed scenery. Instead of blasting one soundtrack across an entire park, Disney creates different audio environments for different lands. As you move from Adventureland into Tomorrowland, the music gradually changes without an obvious starting or stopping point. Your brain accepts the transition without thinking about it. Even attractions use directional sound to guide attention, build suspense, or create emotional moments before you ever see what's around the corner. Remove that soundtrack, and the experience suddenly feels surprisingly empty. Imagine riding Pirates of the Caribbean without the music, sound effects, or distant voices echoing through the caverns. It would still be an impressive ride, but much of its personality would disappear. Disney understands that people don't just see stories, they hear them. The music quietly tells your emotions how to feel before your eyes fully understand what's happening. It's invisible storytelling that works so well, most guests only notice it when the music suddenly stops. 10. The famous Disney magic often comes from tiny details nobody notices until someone points them out. Look closely around Disney parks, and you'll discover that almost nothing is random. Benches are positioned to create better views. Windows on Main Street contain the names of important people who helped build Disneyland and Walt Disney World. Paint colors are chosen to hide maintenance areas, while carefully placed plants block views that would ruin the fantasy. Even forced walking paths subtly encourage guests to discover new shops or attractions without feeling like they're being directed. None of these details are particularly impressive on their own. Together, however, they create the feeling that everything simply works. That's probably Disney's biggest secret. The company doesn't rely on one spectacular illusion. It relies on thousands of tiny decisions that most visitors never consciously notice. Every hidden trick supports another hidden trick until the entire place feels effortless. The real magic isn't a castle, a parade, or a fireworks show. It's the invisible design connecting all of them. Once you start spotting these details, you realize Disney wasn't just entertaining you. It was quietly directing your attention from the moment you walked through the gate until the moment you reluctantly headed back to the parking lot. 11. Disney almost never paints anything by accident, and some colors exist mainly to disappear. One of the strangest secrets in Disney parks isn't hidden behind a locked door, it's sitting in plain sight. Imagineers use carefully selected paint colors to draw your attention toward important landmarks while making less attractive things almost invisible. The most famous example is a shade unofficially known as Go Away Green. Utility buildings, backstage fences, electrical boxes, maintenance doors, and other necessary structures are often painted in muted green-gray tones that naturally blend into surrounding trees and landscaping. Your eyes simply glide past them without much thought. It's surprisingly effective because the human brain pays far less attention to objects that match their environment. Disney doesn't remove every ugly object. That would be impossible. Instead, they convince your brain that those objects aren't worth noticing. Once someone points out the trick, you'll suddenly spot hidden doors and equipment everywhere. Until then, your attention stays exactly where Disney wants it, on castles, mountains, attractions, and beautifully themed scenery. It's camouflage worthy of a military operation, except the mission is protecting the illusion that magic has no maintenance crew. 12. Those mysterious windows above Main Street aren't random decorations. They're some of the highest honors Disney can give. Most visitors walk down Main Street, USA, looking at the shops below while barely noticing the second-story windows. That's a shame because many of those windows contain fictional business names honoring people who made extraordinary contributions to Disney history. They're known as Main Street windows, and receiving one is considered one of the greatest recognitions inside the Walt Disney Company. Instead of statues or giant monuments, Disney celebrates legendary Imagineers, artists, executives, musicians, and innovators through playful advertisements for imaginary businesses. One window might advertise a fictional piano teacher while quietly honoring a composer. Another may reference an imaginary dentist while recognizing someone who shaped Disneyland forever. It's a brilliant tribute because it perfectly fits the storytelling. Guests don't feel like they're walking through a memorial. They feel like they're strolling through an old American town. Meanwhile, Disney's greatest contributors become permanent residents of Main Street. Thousands of people pass beneath those windows every day without realizing they're looking at decades of Disney history hidden behind charming Victorian lettering. 13. Cinderella Castle isn't made of stone, bricks, or ancient magic. It relies on modern engineering that's far more practical than fairy tales. Standing in front of Cinderella Castle it's easy to imagine massive stone walls thick enough to survive a medieval siege. The reality is much less romantic, but far more impressive. The castle is primarily constructed using steel framing, concrete, fiberglass, plaster, and other modern building materials designed to withstand Florida's harsh weather, including hurricanes. Disney wasn't trying to recreate a European fortress stone by stone. They wanted something that looked timeless, while remaining safe, durable, and relatively lightweight. Many decorative towers are made from fiberglass because it's easier to maintain and resistant to moisture. The illusion works so well that most guests never question it. They simply accept that they're standing before a centuries-old royal palace. In truth, it's a masterpiece of themed architecture where appearance matters more than traditional construction methods. Disney understands something Hollywood has known for generations. Audiences don't need actual castles, they need convincing castles. As long as the story feels real, nobody stops to ask whether the tallest tower is actually made from fiberglass instead of granite. 14 Disney parks are cleaner because someone is almost always cleaning them. You just rarely notice it happening. Visitors constantly praise how spotless Disney parks look, especially considering that tens of thousands of people may pass through in a single day. The secret isn't magical self-cleaning pavement. It's an enormous custodial operation working almost invisibly from opening until closing. Cast members patrol continuously, picking up litter within moments, wiping railings, emptying trash cans, and cleaning restrooms throughout the day rather than waiting until night. Many even answer guest questions while cleaning, turning maintenance into customer service without breaking the atmosphere. If someone spills popcorn or drops an ice cream cone, chances are a cast member is already walking toward it before most guests even notice. This constant attention creates the impression that people simply don't litter, when in reality the cleanup is incredibly fast and remarkably organized. Walt Disney believed that cleanliness shaped how people felt about an environment. A dirty walkway instantly damages the illusion of perfection. So instead of accepting mess as unavoidable, Disney built an entire system designed to erase it almost as quickly as it appears. Magic, it turns out, often arrives carrying a broom. 15 Disney's famous queue lines are designed to distract you from the fact that you're standing still. Nobody enjoys waiting for 2 hours to ride an attraction. Disney knows that better than anyone. Instead of treating lines as empty spaces, Imagineers transform them into extensions of the story. The queue for Haunted Mansion slowly introduces mysterious details before guests even enter the building. Expedition Everest surrounds visitors with artifacts and expedition equipment that build anticipation. Star Wars attractions fill waiting areas with props, vehicles, technology, and conversations that make you feel like you've already stepped into another galaxy. Even when the line barely moves, your attention keeps shifting towards something new. The waiting becomes part of the entertainment, rather than a pause between attractions. Disney can't eliminate long lines, but it can change how your brain experiences them. That's an important difference. Compare that to standing inside a plain concrete hallway with nothing to see except the back of someone else's baseball cap. Suddenly, Disney's approach feels surprisingly generous. You're still waiting, but you're also exploring, observing, and slowly entering the story. Before long, the ride has technically begun, even though you haven't boarded anything yet. 16 Walt Disney loved trains so much that they quietly influenced the layout of Disneyland itself. Before Disneyland opened in 1955, Walt Disney had already developed a serious fascination with railroads. He even built a miniature steam railroad called the Carrollwood Pacific Railroad at his own home. That passion eventually became part of Disneyland's DNA. The Disneyland Railroad circles the entire park, serving as both transportation and storytelling. It also acts as a subtle boundary between the ordinary outside world and the carefully designed fantasy inside. When guests enter through the tunnel beneath the train station, they leave the real world behind without consciously realizing the psychological transition. Throughout the park, train whistles, stations, and tracks reinforce a sense of adventure rooted in classic American travel. Long before airplanes became the standard way to cross the country, railroads represented exploration, discovery, and optimism. Walt wanted visitors to experience those emotions the moment they arrived. To most guests, it's simply a charming old-fashioned train. To Walt Disney, it represented childhood dreams, American history, and the journey into imagination itself. Sometimes the smallest ride in the park explains the biggest idea behind the entire place. 17 Disney rarely lets you see what comes next because curiosity keeps people walking. Have you ever noticed that you almost never get a full view across an entire Disney park? That's intentional. Imagineers often use trees, buildings, curves, rockwork, and carefully positioned landmarks to block long sightlines. Instead of revealing everything at once, they encourage guests to keep moving by offering only small glimpses of what lies ahead. Maybe you spot the top of a mountain beyond a cluster of trees, or hear music drifting from another themed land. Your curiosity does the rest. It feels natural, but it's carefully planned environmental storytelling. If you could stand at the entrance and see every attraction immediately, much of the excitement would disappear. Discovery would become a checklist instead of an adventure. Disney understands that anticipation can be just as enjoyable as the destination itself. Every corner promises something new without giving away the entire surprise. It's remarkably similar to a good movie trailer. It reveals just enough to keep you interested while hiding the best parts until later. Your feet think they're making independent decisions, but the park has quietly been guiding them all along. 18. Even the music changes depending on where you're standing, and most people never notice the transition. Walk from Frontierland into Fantasyland, or from Adventureland into Tomorrowland, and something interesting happens. Without any dramatic announcement, the soundtrack around you slowly changes. Disney carefully overlaps music zones so one area gently fades into another instead of stopping abruptly. It's a surprisingly complex audio design that prevents guests from feeling like they've crossed an invisible border. One moment you're hearing adventurous jungle rhythms, and a few steps later you're surrounded by cheerful orchestral melodies or futuristic electronic sounds. The transition feels effortless because your brain naturally accepts gradual change. Imagine if every land blasted its soundtrack at full volume right up to the edge. The result would be complete chaos. Instead, Disney layers sound almost like a film editor blending scenes together. Guests may never consciously remember the music changing, but they absolutely remember how each land made them feel. Once again, Disney proves that some of its strongest storytelling isn't visual at all. Sometimes the most powerful illusion is something your ears understand long before your brain catches up. 19. Disney doesn't just hide backstage areas. They carefully control what you can see from almost every angle. One of the easiest ways to break immersion is spotting something that clearly doesn't belong. A futuristic spaceship loses some of its magic if you can also see a cowboy saloon or a modern office building behind it. That's why Disney spends enormous effort controlling sightlines throughout its parks. Trees are planted in strategic locations. Berms surround Disneyland. Artificial mountains block distant views. Buildings are positioned to conceal parking lots, roads, and maintenance facilities. Every major structure helps protect the illusion of the world around it. Guests rarely stop and appreciate what's missing because that's exactly the point. You're supposed to focus on pirates, jungles, fairy tales, or galaxies far away, not delivery trucks and employee offices. It's like watching a movie without noticing the cameras, microphones, and lighting equipment just outside the frame. Disney's greatest visual effects often involve hiding reality rather than adding fantasy. Once you understand this philosophy, you realize the parks are less like collections of rides and more like enormous movie sets designed to keep the outside world permanently out of view. 20. Perhaps Disney's biggest secret is that the real product was never the rides. It was the memories you created while experiencing them. Ask someone about their favorite Disney vacation, and they rarely begin by listing technical specifications or engineering achievements. Instead, they talk about watching fireworks with family, laughing during a ride, meeting a favorite character, or seeing a child's face light up for the first time. Disney understands that people don't remember every detail equally. They remember emotional moments. Everything else, the architecture, music, landscaping, lighting, smells, hidden pathways, queue design, costumes, and storytelling, works together to make those moments feel bigger than they otherwise would. That's why Disney invests so much energy into details many guests never consciously notice. Every tiny decision supports an emotional experience rather than existing for its own sake. Looking back years later, most visitors won't remember where every trash can stood or which building used forced perspective. They'll simply remember that, somehow, the place felt magical. And that's probably Disney's greatest trick of all. The company doesn't sell castles, parades, or roller coasters. It quietly sells memories that often become far more valuable than the ticket itself. 21. If you've ever wondered why Disney parks somehow feel larger than they really are, the answer is hidden in the roads beneath your feet. Disney rarely builds long, perfectly straight walkways because straight lines reveal too much too quickly. Instead, paths gently curve, split, and bend around landscaping, water, rock formations, or buildings. As a result, your brain constantly discovers new views instead of seeing the entire park at once. You may walk only a few hundred feet, yet it feels like you've traveled much farther because every turn reveals something different. This design also helps spread crowds more naturally. Guests instinctively follow whichever path looks the most interesting, reducing congestion without realizing they're being subtly guided. It's a trick borrowed from landscape architecture rather than amusement parks. The goal isn't to confuse visitors, but to make exploration feel rewarding. Every corner promises another surprise, another photograph, or another attraction waiting just out of sight. Disney understands that a journey feels longer when it's filled with discoveries instead of empty space. Somehow, a 20-minute walk becomes part of the adventure instead of simply getting from one ride to the next. 22. Disney hides hundreds of practical safety features inside decorations so carefully that guests almost never recognize them. Every attraction has handrails, barriers, emergency exits, cameras, speakers, and maintenance access points. The challenge is making all of those necessities disappear into the story. Instead of installing plain metal fences everywhere, Disney disguises barriers as wooden crates, stone walls, pirate ropes, decorative gardens, old mining equipment, castle railings, or jungle ruins. Emergency doors often match surrounding architecture so perfectly that thousands of guests walk past them every day without realizing they're exits. Even security cameras are frequently blended into themed lighting fixtures or decorative structures. Disney never wanted visitors to feel like they were walking through an airport or shopping mall covered with warning signs. Safety is essential, but it shouldn't constantly interrupt the illusion. That's why Imagineers spend enormous effort making practical engineering look like storytelling. Ironically, the better they do their job, the less anyone notices it. Guests leave believing everything looked completely natural, when in reality they spent the day surrounded by carefully hidden infrastructure designed to keep millions of people moving safely through one of the busiest entertainment destinations in the world. 23. The water in Disney attractions isn't just water. It has its own carefully managed personality. People often joke that they can recognize the smell of Pirates of the Caribbean long before they see the boats. Surprisingly, there is some truth behind that memory. Disney treats attraction water very differently depending on its purpose. Decorative fountains, lakes, rivers, and ride systems each require different filtration, circulation, and treatment methods. In dark rides like Pirates of the Caribbean, the water is carefully maintained but intentionally kept darker, using special dyes and lighting techniques. The dark color hides ride tracks, underwater equipment, pumps, and mechanical systems that would instantly ruin the illusion if guests could clearly see them. Your brain assumes the water is much deeper than it actually is. Combined with dramatic lighting, reflections, and sound effects, the result feels mysterious and believable. Many longtime Disney fans say they instantly recognize the distinctive atmosphere of these attractions, even years later. It's remarkable how something as ordinary as water becomes another storytelling tool. Disney doesn't simply fill a canal and launch boats into it. They engineer an environment where even the reflections help tell the story. 24. There is a reason Disney characters almost never break the fantasy, no matter what strange question a guest asks them. Meeting Mickey Mouse or a Disney princess feels surprisingly believable because performers receive extensive training in improvisation as well as character behavior. If a child asks Cinderella whether she owns a smartphone or whether Spider-Man lives nearby, the performer doesn't suddenly become confused. Instead, they answer from the character's perspective, keeping the fantasy alive without directly contradicting reality. The same principle applies throughout the parks. Characters avoid discussing topics that don't belong in their fictional worlds. Imagine asking Captain Hook about modern airplanes, or asking Belle whether she has seen the latest superhero movie. The answers stay firmly inside Disney's storytelling universe. It sounds simple, But maintaining that consistency for hours while interacting with thousands of unpredictable guests requires remarkable skill. Every conversation becomes part of the experience rather than an interruption. Disney understands that children don't remember technical perfection. They remember whether the character truly felt real. That illusion survives because performers stay committed, even when someone asks the kind of question no fairy tale ever expected. 25 Sleeping Beauty Castle in California looks much smaller than Cinderella Castle, yet Disney still makes it feel like the heart of Disneyland. Unlike Florida's towering castle, Sleeping Beauty Castle at Disneyland stands only about 77 feet tall. By normal standards, that's surprisingly modest for one of the world's most recognizable castles. Yet very few first-time visitors complain that it feels too small. That's because Disney again relies on forced perspective. Upper towers gradually shrink in size, windows become smaller, decorative elements become more delicate, and architectural details create the illusion of far greater height. The surrounding landscape also helps by carefully framing the structure from popular viewing angles. Walt Disney personally wanted the castle to welcome guests without overwhelming the intimate scale of Disneyland itself. Rather than competing with nearby attractions, it acts as a visual centerpiece connecting the entire park. The funny part is that many people don't realize how relatively small it is until they see photographs comparing it with Cinderella Castle. Disney proves once again that perception often matters more than measurements. A convincing illusion, supported by thoughtful design, easily defeats raw size when creating unforgettable memories. 26 Disney intentionally creates tiny moments of surprise because unexpected discoveries stay in your memory much longer than obvious attractions. Not every magical moment comes from a roller coaster or fireworks show. Sometimes it's a talking trash can, a hidden character footprint, an unexpected musical performance, or a small visual joke tucked into the scenery. Imagineers often refer to these details as rewards for paying attention. Guests who slow down and explore carefully discover things that others walk right past. Maybe it's an inscription carved into a wall that connects to a movie, or a hidden prop that hints at another story taking place nearby. None of these details are necessary for enjoying the attraction. That's exactly why they work so well. They create the feeling that the park contains endless secrets waiting to be uncovered. Visitors return again and again because they're convinced there's always something they missed. Disney doesn't simply entertain people for one afternoon. It encourages curiosity that lasts for years. The more closely you look, the more the parks seem to reward your attention, making every visit feel slightly different from the last. 27 Walt Disney insisted that Disneyland should never feel finished, and that philosophy still shapes every Disney park today. One of Walt Disney's most famous ideas was that Disneyland would never truly be complete as long as imagination continued to exist. That wasn't just a clever marketing slogan. It became a design philosophy that continues decades after his death. Attractions are updated, restaurants change menus, entertainment evolves, technology improves, and entirely new lands appear where older experiences once stood. Some longtime fans miss retired attractions, while others celebrate the arrival of something new. That constant evolution is exactly what Walt imagined. He believed a theme park should behave more like a living city than a museum frozen in time. Of course, balancing nostalgia with innovation is never easy. Every major change sparks passionate debates among Disney fans. Yet the parks continue growing because standing still was never part of the plan. Ironically, one of Disney's oldest traditions is continuous change. The place designed to preserve childhood memories keeps reinventing itself for every new generation, ensuring that returning guests always have at least one more reason to come back. 28 Disney carefully controls what you hear before you even see an attraction, making your curiosity do most of the work. Imagine walking through Frontierland and hearing distant screams from Big Thunder Mountain Railroad long before the track comes into view, or hearing eerie voices drifting from Haunted Mansion while the building is still partially hidden behind trees. Disney deliberately layers attraction sounds into surrounding areas to create anticipation. You don't simply discover a ride, you slowly become aware that something exciting is happening nearby. The human brain naturally follows interesting sounds, especially laughter, music, or screams of excitement. Disney uses this instinct to encourage exploration without placing giant flashing signs everywhere. Long before your eyes locate the attraction, your ears have already sparked your curiosity. This creates a sense of discovery that feels much more natural than obvious advertising. Guests follow the sounds almost instinctively, arriving already excited before they've even seen the entrance. Once again, Disney demonstrates that storytelling isn't limited to what appears directly in front of you. Sometimes the most effective invitation comes from something you can't quite see yet but absolutely want to investigate. 29 Disney's nighttime transformation is planned almost as carefully as opening day itself. Many visitors assume nighttime simply means turning on decorative lights, but Disney treats evening as an entirely different version of the park. Lighting designers carefully adjust colors, brightness, and focus so familiar places suddenly feel new after sunset. Buildings that looked cheerful during daylight become dramatic under warm lighting. Pathways feel more intimate. Castles sparkle differently depending on the season. Even background music often changes slightly to match the atmosphere. During major nighttime spectaculars, nearly every surrounding light is coordinated to support the show rather than compete with it. It's almost like watching a theater production where every spotlight has been rehearsed for months. Guests frequently discover that attractions they enjoyed during the afternoon feel completely different after dark. Disney wants that contrast. Instead of offering one park experience from morning until closing, they quietly create two. Visitors often stay longer simply because the environment changes enough to make familiar locations feel worth exploring all over again. The park doesn't close when the sun goes down. It simply changes costumes. 30 Disney's greatest illusion may be convincing millions of people that everything happens effortlessly, when almost nothing is left to chance. Every parade, fireworks show, restaurant, attraction, character greeting, landscaping decision, soundtrack, and guest interaction depends on extraordinary planning behind the scenes. Thousands of cast members coordinate logistics that most visitors never notice, ensuring that deliveries happen quietly, maintenance appears almost invisible, entertainment runs on schedule, and problems are solved before they become obvious. Guests experience a seamless vacation because countless people are constantly managing details hidden just outside view. That's perhaps the biggest secret Disney never advertised. Magic isn't the absence of hard work. It's what hard work looks like when executed so well that nobody notices it. The parks feel spontaneous because the preparation is incredibly precise. Visitors leave believing they experienced something effortless, when in reality they witnessed one of the most sophisticated entertainment operations ever created. Disney's real masterpiece isn't a single ride or castle. It's the invisible system connecting everything together so perfectly that millions of people willingly believe, if only for one day, that magic really does exist. 31 Disney's famous fireworks are choreographed so precisely that they function more like a Broadway production than a simple pyrotechnic display. Most people look up at the explosions above the castle and assume they're watching carefully timed fireworks. In reality, they're watching a performance controlled by sophisticated computer systems that synchronize fireworks, projection mapping, music, lasers, lighting, and special effects down to fractions of a second. The timing has to be exact because every burst is connected to a specific musical note or emotional moment in the story. A shell exploding 1 second too early could ruin an entire sequence. Even the launch locations are carefully chosen so the fireworks appear directly above the castle from the guest's perspective, even though many shells are actually fired from areas behind the park. Safety, storytelling, and visual illusion all work together without the audience ever thinking about the engineering involved. When children gasp as the sky fills with color, they aren't admiring technical precision. They're simply feeling wonder. Disney spends countless hours creating that reaction, proving once again that the best technology is the kind nobody notices because it disappears behind pure emotion. 32 Disney intentionally makes many buildings slightly imperfect because perfect buildings don't feel believable. Walk through Liberty Square or Frontierland and you'll notice weathered bricks, uneven paint, faded signs, worn wood, and tiny cracks in the walls. None of that happened naturally. Imagineers carefully add artificial aging to make buildings feel like they've existed for decades rather than being constructed a few years ago. If every wall looked freshly painted and every board looked brand new, the entire illusion would collapse. Real towns collect imperfections over time, so Disney deliberately builds history into the scenery before the first guest even arrives. You may never consciously notice chipped paint or faded shutters, but your brain recognizes authenticity. This approach extends to props, furniture, streetlights, and storefronts throughout the parks. Everything tells a quiet story about the people who supposedly lived or worked there long before you visited. Disney isn't simply building attractions, it's creating believable worlds where every scratch and stain serves a purpose. Ironically, some of the most carefully planned details are the ones designed to look completely accidental. 33. The famous Disney weenies have nothing to do with hot dogs, even though Walt Disney loved those too. Walt Disney used the unusual term weenie to describe a large visual landmark that naturally attracted guests toward a particular area. Cinderella Castle is perhaps the most famous example, but Space Mountain, the Tree of Life, and Expedition Everest all perform the same role. Instead of covering the park with giant arrows pointing toward attractions, Disney lets your curiosity follow these towering landmarks. You spot something interesting in the distance and instinctively begin walking toward it. Along the way, you pass restaurants, shops, smaller attractions, and unexpected discoveries that make the journey just as enjoyable as the destination. It's surprisingly simple psychology. People naturally move toward interesting objects on the horizon. Walt understood that decades before modern theme park design became a professional discipline. Today, nearly every major theme park uses similar principles, but Disney refined the technique into an art form. Guests feel completely free to choose where they're going, while the park quietly encourages those decisions through architecture rather than obvious instructions. It's subtle guidance disguised as spontaneous exploration. 34 Disney spends enormous effort making crowds feel smaller than they actually are. On a busy holiday, tens of thousands of people may be inside a Disney park at the same time. Yet certain areas still manage to feel surprisingly comfortable. Part of that comes from intelligent planning. Wide pathways appear where crowds naturally gather. Narrower streets create cozy atmosphere where traffic is lighter. Popular attractions are distributed throughout the park to prevent everyone from moving in the same direction at once. Entertainment, food locations, shopping areas, and character meet and greets also help spread visitors across different lands. Even landscaping plays a role by breaking large crowds into smaller visual groups. Disney knows that perception matters almost as much as actual numbers. 2,000 people standing in one plaza feel overwhelming. The same 2,000 people distributed across several connected spaces feel far more manageable. Guests may still wait in long lines, but the park itself rarely feels like one giant traffic jam. That balance doesn't happen by accident. It reflects decades of studying how large groups naturally move, pause, gather, and explore throughout the day. 35. The famous partner statue of Walt Disney holding Mickey Mouse's hand quietly contains one of the company's most important messages. Every Disney fan has seen the bronze statue standing in front of Cinderella Castle or Sleeping Beauty Castle, but many overlook what makes it so meaningful. Walt Disney isn't pointing proudly toward himself. He's gesturing toward the future while holding Mickey Mouse's hand as though inviting guests to continue the journey with him. The statue celebrates imagination rather than personal achievement. Walt often described Disneyland as a place built for families to enjoy together, and the sculpture reflects that philosophy perfectly. It doesn't show him sitting behind a desk signing contracts or directing meetings. Instead, it captures the partnership between a dreamer and the character who changed entertainment forever. Children see Mickey. Adults often recognize Walt. Together they represent creativity passed from one generation to the next. The statue has become one of the most photographed locations in every Disney park, yet its emotional message remains surprisingly understated. It's less a monument to success and more an invitation to keep imagining, which was exactly how Walt hoped people would remember him. 36. Disney carefully chooses where benches go, and the placement has surprisingly little to do with giving tired feet a rest. Of course, guests need places to sit, but Disney treats benches as another storytelling and crowd management tool. Many are positioned where parents can comfortably watch nearby attractions while children play. Others face castles, gardens, rivers, or parade routes, encouraging visitors to pause and appreciate carefully designed views. You'll also notice benches near snack stands, creating comfortable spaces where people naturally stop to eat instead of blocking busy walkways. Some are intentionally placed beneath trees to provide shade during hot afternoons, while others help define gathering spaces without using fences or barriers. It seems like ordinary park furniture until you realize almost every bench supports several different purposes simultaneously. Disney rarely places anything without considering how guests will use the surrounding space. Even resting becomes part of the overall experience. Instead of simply scattering seating wherever there is room, Imagineers integrate benches into the rhythm of the park itself. Once again, something completely ordinary quietly becomes another invisible piece of thoughtful design. 37 Disney's famous background music is updated far more often than most guests realize. Many visitors assume the background music has remained unchanged for decades, but Disney regularly refreshes playlists while preserving each land's identity. The challenge is introducing new arrangements, improved recordings, or updated selections without making longtime fans feel like something familiar has disappeared. Music supervisors carefully balance nostalgia with freshness, ensuring that classic melodies remain recognizable while improving sound quality and expanding variety. Seasonal celebrations often bring temporary musical changes as well, giving returning guests slightly different experiences throughout the year. Most people never consciously notice these updates because they blend naturally into the environment. That's exactly the goal. Disney doesn't want visitors thinking about soundtrack management while walking down Main Street. They simply want every area to sound alive and appropriate for its setting. It's another reminder that maintaining Disney magic isn't about preserving everything exactly as it was decades ago. It's about making thoughtful adjustments that keep the experience feeling timeless rather than outdated, even if most guests never realize anything changed at all. 38 Disney's restaurants tell stories too, and sometimes the menu itself becomes part of the theme. Imagineers don't simply choose random food because it tastes good. In many locations, architecture, decorations, music, and menus all support the same narrative. A futuristic restaurant serves dishes that feel different from a rustic frontier tavern. A New Orleans-inspired location offers flavors connected to the city's culinary traditions. Even the names of certain menu items reinforce fictional settings or beloved characters. Guests often think they're just grabbing lunch, but Disney quietly extends storytelling into every meal. The result feels surprisingly immersive, because the environment remains consistent from the moment you enter until you finish eating. Instead of interrupting the adventure, restaurants become another chapter in it. Disney understands that vacations are built from countless small experiences, rather than only headline attractions. A memorable meal can become just as important as a roller coaster when families look back years later. That's why food receives the same careful attention as rides, entertainment, and architecture. Even lunch is expected to help preserve the illusion that you've stepped into another world. 39 Disney intentionally gives guests places to slow down, because nonstop excitement eventually becomes exhausting. It might seem logical to fill every corner of a theme park with loud attractions and constant action, but Disney takes a different approach. Quiet gardens, shaded pathways, waterfront seating, gentle transportation rides, and peaceful corners allow visitors to recharge without leaving the story behind. Walt Disney understood that emotional pacing mattered just as much as physical pacing. If every attraction demanded maximum excitement, guests would become mentally tired much faster. Instead, calm moments make thrilling experiences feel even bigger by comparison. A relaxing ride aboard the Disneyland Railroad or a peaceful walk through beautifully landscaped areas creates breathing room before the next adventure. Many visitors don't consciously plan these breaks. They simply feel drawn toward quieter spaces after several busy attractions. Disney anticipated that need decades ago. Rather than treating rest as wasted time, Imagineers designed it into the experience itself. Sometimes the secret to making magic last all day isn't adding another thrill. It's knowing exactly when people need a moment to slow down. 40. Perhaps the biggest Disney secret isn't hidden in a tunnel or painted on a wall. It's hidden inside the way people remember the experience years later. Ask someone about their favorite Disney vacation 5 or 10 years after it happened, and the details often become strangely selective. They may forget exactly how long they waited in line, what time they ate lunch, or which direction they walked first. Instead, they remember hearing the castle music at sunset, watching their child hug Mickey Mouse, laughing together on Pirates of the Caribbean, or seeing fireworks light up the sky. Disney understands that memory doesn't preserve every moment equally. It naturally highlights emotional peaks, meaningful surprises, and satisfying endings. That's why the company invests so much effort into carefully shaping those moments throughout the day. The goal isn't to create a perfect vacation without inconvenience. That's impossible. The goal is to create enough unforgettable highlights that, years later, those become the stories families continue telling. In the end, Disney isn't really competing with other theme parks. It's competing for a permanent place inside your happiest memories. And that may be the smartest secret of all. 41 Disney created an entire language of background details that most guests never consciously notice, but filmmakers study constantly. Watch almost any Disney attraction carefully, and you'll find objects that quietly tell stories without a single spoken word. An abandoned suitcase suggests someone just missed a train. A half-finished meal hints that a character left in a hurry. A dusty portrait, a cracked lantern, or an old newspaper can explain decades of fictional history in seconds. Imagineers call this environmental storytelling, and it has influenced museums, video games, movies, and theme parks around the world. Instead of placing signs everywhere explaining what happened, Disney lets guests piece together the story themselves. It feels far more satisfying because your imagination becomes part of the experience. Even if you don't consciously notice every clue, your brain senses that the environment feels complete. That's why many attractions remain enjoyable after multiple visits. Every ride contains dozens of tiny details that reveal themselves only when you're looking somewhere new. Disney doesn't simply tell stories. It builds places where the scenery quietly continues telling them long after the narration has stopped. 42 Walt Disney originally imagined Epcot as something far more ambitious than a theme park. Today, Epcot is known for its attractions, international pavilions, and futuristic ideas. But Walt Disney's original vision was dramatically different. Before his death in 1966, he introduced plans for the experimental prototype community of tomorrow, or Epcot, as a functioning city where people would actually live and where new technologies could be tested in everyday life. The concept included advanced transportation systems, constantly evolving neighborhoods, and innovative urban planning. Walt believed real cities could become cleaner, more efficient, and more enjoyable if businesses continually improved them instead of leaving them unchanged for decades. After his passing, Disney decided not to build the residential city exactly as planned. Instead, many of Walt's ideas inspired the Epcot theme park that eventually opened in 1982. It's fascinating to realize that one of Disney World's most famous parks began as a proposal to rethink how entire communities might function. The rides are entertaining, but behind them sits one of Walt Disney's boldest dreams, proving his imagination extended far beyond cartoons and castles. 43 Disney parks look surprisingly colorful, but the colors themselves are carefully controlled rather than randomly chosen. Walk through Fantasyland, Adventureland, or Main Street, and everything feels vibrant without becoming overwhelming. That's because Imagineers carefully coordinate color palettes within each themed area. Warm earth tones dominate Frontierland. Rich tropical greens and weathered browns shape Adventureland. Bright Victorian colors define Main Street. Futuristic whites, blues, and metallic finishes often appear in Tomorrowland. Even merchandise, umbrellas, trash cans, signs, and flower arrangements are selected to reinforce these visual identities. Random colors would make the parks feel chaotic and disconnected. Instead, every land develops its own recognizable personality. Guests rarely stop to analyze why one area feels adventurous while another feels nostalgic. But color psychology quietly influences those emotions throughout the day. Disney treats paint almost like another cast member participating in the performance. The goal isn't to impress visitors with artistic theory. It's simply to create environments that feel emotionally consistent from every angle. Once you recognize the pattern, you'll notice that almost every photograph from a Disney park has its own distinct visual mood before anyone even smiles at the camera. 44. The windows in Disney attractions often hide jokes aimed entirely at adults, while children happily miss them. Disney has always enjoyed rewarding observant guests with clever references tucked into signs, posters, labels, and advertisements. While children focus on pirates, princesses, or talking animals, adults occasionally discover subtle wordplay, fictional business names, humorous newspaper headlines, or playful references to Disney history. None of these jokes are inappropriate. They're simply written for people likely to appreciate them. An old advertisement may reference an Imagineer. A fake company name might honor someone who worked on the attraction. A storefront may include a clever historical pun that younger visitors would never understand. These details help make repeat visits rewarding because there is always another hidden reference waiting to be found. Disney knows families experience the parks together, so it quietly provides different layers of entertainment for different ages. Children enjoy the adventure. Adults notice the craftsmanship. Everyone leaves feeling like the experience was created especially for them. That's remarkably difficult storytelling, yet Disney has been refining it for generations without making the extra effort feel obvious. 45 Disney plants thousands of flowers every year, but the landscaping isn't designed only to look beautiful in photographs. The gardens throughout Disney parks are carefully planned to guide movement, frame important views, hide backstage areas, soften large buildings, and create seasonal variety throughout the year. Different flowers bloom at different times, allowing displays to change naturally across the seasons while keeping the parks looking fresh. Low plants encourage guests to cross certain areas visually, while taller shrubs subtly discourage shortcuts without requiring fences. Trees provide shade exactly where crowds tend to gather during the hottest parts of the day. Even flower colors often complement nearby architecture and attractions. Guests usually describe the landscaping as beautiful without realizing how many practical jobs it performs simultaneously. Disney rarely treats decoration as decoration alone. Almost every plant serves both an artistic and functional purpose. The result feels effortless because nature appears to have arranged everything perfectly on its own. In reality, horticulturists constantly maintain, replace, trim, and redesign these living landscapes so the illusion never fades, even though millions of visitors pass through them every single year. Number 46. Disney's famous parade routes are carefully engineered to look spontaneous, even though almost every movement is planned. When a parade appears around the corner, it feels like a magical interruption to your day. Behind the scenes, however, enormous coordination makes that moment possible. Parade timing must account for attraction operations, guest traffic, performer schedules, safety procedures, weather conditions, and countless technical details. Floats move at carefully controlled speeds to keep music synchronized across the route. Cast members quietly manage crowd flow long before the first float arrives. Even stopping points are rehearsed, so characters appear in the best locations for guests to see and photograph them. The goal is making everything feel joyful and effortless rather than tightly choreographed. Children simply wave at their favorite characters. Adults admire colorful costumes. Very few people think about the logistics required to move dozens of performers, massive vehicles, music systems, and thousands of spectators through crowded streets without disrupting the rest of the park. Disney hides remarkable operational complexity beneath what feels like a cheerful neighborhood celebration passing by at exactly the right moment. 47. Some of Disney's most famous sounds were created in surprisingly simple ways that prove creativity often beats expensive technology. Long before digital sound libraries became common, Disney sound designers experimented with everyday objects to create believable effects. Footsteps, doors, wind, thunder, creaking wood, and countless other sounds were carefully recorded or recreated using practical techniques inside recording studios. That tradition continues today. Even with modern technology, authentic sound often comes from imaginative problem-solving rather than computer software alone. Attractions rely on carefully layered audio so every creak, splash, explosion, or whisper feels convincing inside the story. Guests rarely stop to think about where those sounds originated because they blend naturally into the environment. That's exactly the point. Great sound design disappears behind the experience itself. Disney has always understood that believable audio can make artificial environments feel unexpectedly real. You may know a pirate ship isn't actually sailing or a haunted mansion isn't truly haunted, but convincing sound persuades your imagination to cooperate anyway. Sometimes your ears believe the fantasy before your eyes fully catch up. 48 Disney spends years designing attractions that guests experience for only a few minutes, and that's exactly why they leave such lasting memories. A ride lasting 5 or 6 minutes may require nearly a decade of planning, engineering, testing, storytelling, construction, and refinement before the first visitor ever climbs aboard. Imagineers debate everything from lighting angles and soundtrack timing to queue decorations and exit locations, because every decision influences how guests remember the experience afterward. Even ride vehicles are carefully designed, so people naturally look toward important scenes at exactly the right moment. Disney knows those few minutes may become someone's favorite childhood memory, so nothing is treated as insignificant. The remarkable part is that guests usually leave talking about the adventure itself rather than the extraordinary effort required to create it. That's the highest compliment Disney can receive. When all the planning disappears behind laughter, surprise, and wonder, the illusion has succeeded. The attraction feels effortless because thousands of creative decisions quietly work together, reminding us that the greatest magic is often the craftsmanship nobody ever notices. 49 Disney has quietly influenced almost every modern theme park, whether competitors admit it or not. Before Disneyland opened in 1955, many amusement parks focused mainly on individual rides placed side by side with little connection between them. Walt Disney introduced something different: themed lands with consistent architecture, costumes, music, landscaping, storytelling, and attention to detail. That philosophy changed the entire industry. Today, visitors expect immersive environments instead of collections of unrelated attractions because Disney proved people valued complete experiences rather than isolated rides. Theme parks around the world now invest heavily in storytelling, environmental design, character interaction, and hidden details that reward repeat visits. The influence extends beyond entertainment. Museums, zoos, shopping districts, resorts, and even sports venues borrow techniques first refined by Disney Imagineering. Guests may compare parks based on roller coasters or ticket prices, but many of the experiences they now consider normal were once revolutionary ideas introduced by Walt Disney and his creative teams. The greatest compliment competitors ever paid Disney may be the fact that so many eventually began designing parks that felt surprisingly familiar. 50. The biggest Disney secret might be that the company never wanted guests to notice most of these secrets in the first place. Forced perspective, hidden infrastructure, carefully placed scents, invisible speakers, color psychology, environmental storytelling, landscaping, music transitions, disguised safety features, and countless other details all share one purpose. They're supposed to disappear. Disney never intended visitors to spend their vacation analyzing architecture or wondering why a pathway curves in a particular direction. The goal has always been much simpler: make families feel like they've stepped into places that couldn't possibly exist in the real world. Ironically, discovering these secrets doesn't destroy the magic. For many fans, it actually makes the experience even more impressive. You begin appreciating not only the castles and attractions, but also the extraordinary craftsmanship supporting every magical moment. Behind every photograph, every parade, every ride, and every memory stands an army of artists, engineers, designers, gardeners, musicians, technicians, and cast members working together toward the same impossible goal. They aren't trying to convince you that magic is real. They're trying to make you forget, just for a little while, that it isn't. 51 of Disney's cleverest tricks happens before you even reach the front gate. Parking lots at Disney World and Disneyland aren't just giant fields filled with cars. They're carefully organized systems designed to reduce stress before your vacation even begins. Parking trams, clearly named sections, oversized directional signs, and traffic control teams all work together to move thousands of vehicles efficiently. Even the names of parking sections are chosen to be memorable instead of confusing numbers or letters. Disney understands that the first 20 minutes of your day influence how you'll remember everything that follows. If guests begin their visit frustrated, tired, and hopelessly searching for their car, that mood follows them into the park. Instead, Disney tries to solve those problems before they become memories. It's surprisingly thoughtful because parking isn't magical, exciting, or glamorous, yet Disney still treats it as part of the overall guest experience. That philosophy separates Disney from many entertainment venues. The magic doesn't start when you see the castle. It quietly begins the moment someone wearing a bright vest waves you into the right parking space with a smile. 52 Disney attractions are designed so your eyes almost always know exactly where to look, even if you never realize you're being guided. Ride designers carefully control lighting, movement, color, sound, and scenery, so your attention naturally shifts toward the most important moment in every scene. Bright lighting highlights characters while darker backgrounds hide technical equipment. Moving objects automatically attract your vision before stationary decorations. Music builds anticipation just before something important appears. Even ride vehicles are angled to help guests face the right direction without needing obvious instructions. Imagine if every scene contained dozens of equally bright lights, moving figures, and flashing effects. Your brain wouldn't know where to focus, and the story would quickly become confusing. Disney avoids that problem by quietly directing your attention like a movie director controls a camera. You never feel manipulated because the transitions happen naturally. One moment you're watching pirates sing, the next you're staring directly at Captain Jack Sparrow without consciously deciding to look that way. The technology is impressive, but the psychology is even more fascinating. Disney doesn't force your attention, it simply makes the right direction feel like your own choice. 53 Disney has mastered the art of making waiting feel shorter without actually changing the length of the line. Beyond themed queue areas, Imagineers use several psychological techniques to improve how guests experience time. Outdoor sections usually move more quickly because visible progress feels rewarding. Indoor sections often contain interesting props, interactive displays, or changing scenery that distract visitors from counting minutes. Disney also avoids long, uninterrupted straight lines whenever possible because seeing hundreds of people ahead instantly makes any wait feel longer. Curves, divided rooms, and changing environments break the experience into smaller pieces that seem easier to manage mentally. The actual wait may still be 60 minutes, but your perception changes dramatically when something new keeps happening around you. It's similar to taking a scenic road trip instead of driving across an empty highway. The distance stays exactly the same, yet the journey feels shorter because your brain stays occupied. Disney understands that happiness isn't determined only by reality. It's heavily influenced by perception, and perception can often be improved through thoughtful design instead of expensive technology. 54. The famous Disney balloons aren't just souvenirs floating above the crowds. They're also brilliant visual markers. Almost everyone notices the colorful Mickey-shaped balloons drifting high above Main Street, but they serve another purpose beyond selling merchandise. Families naturally use them as landmarks while navigating crowded streets. Parents can often spot their own group more easily because someone is carrying a balloon several feet above everyone else's head. The balloons also add movement and color to photographs, making the parks appear even more festive than they already are. Disney understands that objects floating above eye level naturally attract attention, helping create a lively atmosphere throughout the day. Even guests who never buy one still enjoy seeing them bouncing gently above the crowds. It's another example of Disney turning an ordinary retail item into something that quietly improves the overall environment. Children see a magical balloon. Photographers see beautiful composition. Parents see an easy way to keep track of their family. Disney sees all three at the same time, proving once again that one simple object can accomplish far more than most people ever imagine. 55. Some of Disney's most valuable storytelling happens after you leave the attraction instead of before you enter it. Exit areas are carefully designed to extend the experience rather than ending it abruptly. Instead of dumping guests directly onto a sidewalk, many attractions guide visitors through themed environments filled with props, artwork, costumes, or interactive displays that reinforce what they just experienced. Merchandise locations often continue the same visual style instead of feeling like ordinary retail stores. This transition gives people a chance to discuss the ride while they're still emotionally excited about it. Families laugh about favorite scenes, compare reactions, and notice details they missed during the attraction itself. Disney knows memories become stronger when people immediately talk about shared experiences. The exit isn't treated as the end of the story. It's treated as the final chapter. Even if guests never purchase anything, they've already spent a few extra minutes immersed in the same fictional world. That gentle transition helps preserve the emotional high a little longer before reality quietly returns outside. Disney understands that endings matter just as much as beginnings when creating unforgettable experiences. 56. Disney carefully protects sound inside attractions by separating noisy and quiet spaces with remarkable precision. Imagine trying to enjoy the eerie atmosphere inside Haunted Mansion while hearing screams from a nearby roller coaster or dance music from another themed land. The illusion would disappear almost instantly. To prevent that, Imagineers use walls, landscaping, building orientation, enclosed spaces, water features, and carefully controlled audio systems to reduce unwanted noise between attractions. In many cases, background music also helps mask distant sounds that can't be eliminated completely. Waterfalls, fountains, and ambient effects perform double duty by enhancing storytelling while reducing outside distractions. Guests rarely think about acoustic engineering because successful sound design is practically invisible. Yet without it, the parks would feel dramatically less immersive. Every themed environment depends on hearing the right sounds at the right moment, while ignoring everything else happening nearby. Disney doesn't simply build attractions next to each other. It creates carefully isolated worlds where pirates, astronauts, jungle explorers, and fairy tale characters can all exist within walking distance without constantly interrupting one another's stories. 57 Disney's famous transportation systems are attractions in their own right, not just practical ways to travel around the resort. The monorail, Disney Skyliner, water taxis, ferries, steam trains, and classic Main Street vehicles all serve transportation purposes, but Disney intentionally designs them to feel like experiences rather than ordinary commuting. Instead of treating travel as wasted time between destinations, the company turns it into another opportunity for sightseeing and storytelling. Riding the monorail offers unique views unavailable anywhere else. Ferries create relaxing moments on the water before entering the Magic Kingdom. The Disneyland Railroad circles the park while revealing scenery guests can't easily see on foot. Even buses often feature themed announcements that reinforce the Disney atmosphere. Walt Disney believed transportation itself could be entertaining, influenced partly by his lifelong fascination with trains and innovative transit systems. Today, many visitors intentionally ride these vehicles even when walking might actually be faster. That's a remarkable achievement. Disney transformed something people usually tolerate into something many guests actively look forward to experiencing during every vacation. 58 hidden details inside Disney attractions are often added long after construction is finished because Imagineers never truly stop improving them. Most people assume an attraction opens exactly as it will remain forever. In reality, Disney continues adjusting rides, scenery, lighting, dialogue, props, and special effects long after opening day. Sometimes new references are added to honor retiring Imagineers. Occasionally, small visual jokes appear for observant fans. Improved technology may allow better effects without changing the attraction's overall story. These updates are often so subtle that regular visitors don't immediately notice them, yet returning fans eventually discover something new. This ongoing refinement reflects Walt Disney's belief that Disneyland would never truly be completed. Rather than freezing attractions permanently in time, Disney quietly allows them to evolve while preserving their original spirit. It's almost like watching a favorite movie receive tiny improvements over many years without changing the story you already love. Guests feel rewarded for returning because there's always another detail waiting to be discovered. The parks continue growing not only through massive new attractions, but also through countless invisible improvements happening behind the scenes. 59 Disney's greatest engineering achievement may be convincing millions of guests that complicated technology feels completely effortless. Modern attractions rely on sophisticated ride systems, advanced robotics, projection technology, synchronized lighting, computer-controlled audio, wireless communication, and thousands of moving mechanical components. Yet guests rarely leave talking about processors, hydraulic systems, or software. They talk about flying with Peter Pan, escaping pirates, exploring galaxies, or traveling through haunted mansions. That's exactly what Imagineers hope will happen. Technology exists only to support the story, never to become the story itself. If visitors spend more time admiring machinery than feeling emotion, something has gone wrong. Disney consistently chooses storytelling over showing off technical capabilities, even when the engineering itself is groundbreaking. That philosophy explains why many attractions remain beloved decades after opening. They aren't remembered because they contained impressive machines. They're remembered because those machines helped create unforgettable emotional experiences. In the end, technology fades into the background while the adventure stays in your memory, which is probably the highest compliment any engineer could ever receive. 60. After all these secrets, perhaps the most surprising truth is that Disney has never relied on a single magical trick. There isn't one hidden tunnel, one special paint color, one famous castle, or one revolutionary attraction responsible for Disney's success. The real secret is accumulation. Thousands of tiny decisions, many almost invisible on their own, combine into one unforgettable experience. A carefully planted tree supports a perfectly framed photograph. A hidden speaker reinforces the atmosphere. A cast member's smile makes a child feel welcome. A subtle scent triggers a memory years later. A curved pathway creates curiosity. A piece of background music quietly changes your mood without asking permission. None of these details seem extraordinary individually. Together they become something millions of people describe simply as Disney magic. That's why competitors can copy individual rides or technologies, yet still struggle to recreate the same emotional connection. Disney never built its reputation on one brilliant idea. It built it on thousands of thoughtful ones working together so seamlessly that guests rarely notice any of them. And perhaps that's the greatest secret Disney never wanted anyone to realize. 51. One of Disney's cleverest tricks happens before you even reach the front gate. Parking lots at Disney World and Disneyland aren't just giant fields filled with cars. They're carefully organized systems designed to reduce stress before your vacation even begins. Parking trams, clearly named sections, oversized directional signs, and traffic control teams all work together to move thousands of vehicles efficiently. Even the names of parking sections are chosen to be memorable instead of confusing numbers or letters. Disney understands that the first 20 minutes of your day influence how you'll remember everything that follows. If guests begin their visit frustrated, tired, and hopelessly searching for their car, that mood follows them into the park. Instead, Disney tries to solve those problems before they become memories. It's surprisingly thoughtful because parking isn't magical, exciting, or glamorous. Yet Disney still treats it as part of the overall guest experience. That philosophy separates Disney from many entertainment venues. The magic doesn't start when you see the castle. It quietly begins the moment someone wearing a bright vest waves you into the right parking space with a smile. 52 Disney attractions are designed so your eyes almost always know exactly where to look, even if you never realize you're being guided. Ride designers carefully control lighting, movement, color, sound, and scenery, so your attention naturally shifts toward the most important moment in every scene. Bright lighting highlights characters while darker backgrounds hide technical equipment. Moving objects automatically attract your vision before stationary decorations. Music builds anticipation just before something important appears. Even ride vehicles are angled to help guests face the right direction without needing obvious instructions. Imagine if every scene contained dozens of equally bright lights, moving figures, and flashing effects. Your brain wouldn't know where to focus, and the story would quickly become confusing. Disney avoids that problem by quietly directing your attention like a movie director controls a camera. You never feel manipulated because the transitions happen naturally. One moment you're watching pirates sing, the next, you're staring directly at Captain Jack Sparrow without consciously deciding to look that way. The technology is impressive, but the psychology is even more fascinating. Disney doesn't force your attention. It simply makes the right direction feel like your own choice. 53 Disney has mastered the art of making waiting feel shorter without actually changing the length of the line. Beyond themed queue areas, Imagineers use several psychological techniques to improve how guests experience time. Outdoor sections usually move more quickly because visible progress feels rewarding. Indoor sections often contain interesting props, interactive displays, or changing scenery that distract visitors from counting minutes. Disney also avoids long, uninterrupted straight lines whenever possible, because seeing hundreds of people ahead instantly makes any wait feel longer. Curves, divided rooms, and changing environments break the experience into smaller pieces that seem easier to manage mentally. The actual wait may still be 60 minutes, but your perception changes dramatically when something new keeps happening around you. It's similar to taking a scenic road trip instead of driving across an empty highway. The distance stays exactly the same, yet the journey feels shorter because your brain stays occupied. Disney understands that happiness isn't determined only by reality. It's heavily influenced by perception, and perception can often be improved through thoughtful design instead of expensive technology. 54. The famous Disney balloons aren't just souvenirs floating above the crowds. They are also brilliant visual markers. Almost everyone notices the colorful Mickey-shaped balloons drifting high above Main Street, but they serve another purpose beyond selling merchandise. Families naturally use them as landmarks while navigating crowded streets. Parents can often spot their own group more easily because someone is carrying a balloon several feet above everyone else's head. The balloons also add movement and color to photographs, making the parks appear even more festive than they already are. Disney understands that objects floating above eye level naturally attract attention, helping create a lively atmosphere throughout the day. Even guests who never buy one still enjoy seeing them bouncing gently above the crowds. It's another example of Disney turning an ordinary retail item into something that quietly improves the overall environment. Children see a magical balloon. Photographers see beautiful composition. Parents see an easy way to keep track of their family. Disney sees all three at the same time, proving once again that one simple object can accomplish far more than most people ever imagine. 55. Some of Disney's most valuable storytelling happens after you leave the attraction, instead of before you enter it. Exit areas are carefully designed to extend the experience rather than ending it abruptly. Instead of dumping guests directly onto a sidewalk, many attractions guide visitors through themed environments filled with props, artwork, costumes, or interactive displays that reinforce what they just experienced. Merchandise locations often continue the same visual style instead of feeling like ordinary retail stores. This transition gives people a chance to discuss the ride while they're still emotionally excited about it. Families laugh about favorite scenes, compare reactions, and notice details they missed during the attraction itself. Disney knows memories become stronger when people immediately talk about shared experiences. The exit isn't treated as the end of the story, it's treated as the final chapter. Even if guests never purchase anything, they've already spent a few extra minutes immersed in the same fictional world. That gentle transition helps preserve the emotional high a little longer before reality quietly returns outside. Disney understands that endings matter just as much as beginnings when creating unforgettable experiences. 56. Disney carefully protects sound inside attractions by separating noisy and quiet spaces with remarkable precision. Imagine trying to enjoy the eerie atmosphere inside Haunted Mansion while hearing screams from a nearby roller coaster or dance music from another themed land. The illusion would disappear almost instantly. To prevent that, Imagineers use walls, landscaping, building orientation, enclosed spaces, water features, and carefully controlled audio systems to reduce unwanted noise between attractions. In many cases, background music also helps mask distant sounds that can't be eliminated completely. Waterfalls, fountains, and ambient effects perform double duty by enhancing storytelling while reducing outside distractions. Guests rarely think about acoustic engineering because successful sound design is practically invisible. Yet, without it, the parks would feel dramatically less immersive. Every themed environment depends on hearing the right sounds at the right moment, while ignoring everything else happening nearby. Disney doesn't simply build attractions next to each other. It creates carefully isolated worlds where pirates, astronauts, jungle explorers, and fairy tale characters can all exist within walking distance without constantly interrupting one another's stories. 57 Disney's famous transportation systems are attractions in their own right, not just practical ways to travel around the resort. The monorail, Disney Skyliner, water taxis, ferries, steam trains, and classic Main Street vehicles all serve transportation purposes, but Disney intentionally designs them to feel like experiences rather than ordinary commuting. Instead of treating travel as wasted time between destinations, the company turns it into another opportunity for sightseeing and storytelling. Riding the monorail offers unique views unavailable anywhere else. Ferries create relaxing moments on the water before entering the Magic Kingdom. The Disneyland Railroad circles the park while revealing scenery guests can't easily see on foot. Even buses often feature themed announcements that reinforce the Disney atmosphere. Walt Disney believed transportation itself could be entertaining, influenced partly by his lifelong fascination with trains and innovative transit systems. Today, many visitors intentionally ride these vehicles even when walking might actually be faster. That's a remarkable achievement. Disney transformed something people usually tolerate into something many guests actively look forward to experiencing during every vacation. 58 hidden details inside Disney attractions are often added long after construction is finished because Imagineers never truly stop improving them. Most people assume an attraction opens exactly as it will remain forever. In reality, Disney continues adjusting rides, scenery, lighting, dialogue, props, and special effects long after opening day. Sometimes new references are added to honor retiring Imagineers. Occasionally, small visual jokes appear for observant fans. Improved technology may allow better effects without changing the attraction's overall story. These updates are often so subtle that regular visitors don't immediately notice them, yet returning fans eventually discover something new. This ongoing refinement reflects Walt Disney's belief that Disneyland would never truly be completed. Rather than freezing attractions permanently in time, Disney quietly allows them to evolve while preserving their original spirit. It's almost like watching a favorite movie receive tiny improvements over many years without changing the story you already love. Guests feel rewarded for returning because there's always another detail waiting to be discovered. The parks continue growing not only through massive new attractions, but also through countless invisible improvements happening behind the scenes. 59 Disney's greatest engineering achievement may be convincing millions of guests that complicated technology feels completely effortless. Modern attractions rely on sophisticated ride systems, advanced robotics, projection technology, synchronized lighting, computer-controlled audio, wireless communication, and thousands of moving mechanical components. Yet guests rarely leave talking about processors, hydraulic systems, or software. They talk about flying with Peter Pan, escaping pirates, exploring galaxies, or traveling through haunted mansions. That's exactly what Imagineers hope will happen. Technology exists only to support the story, never to become the story itself. If visitors spend more time admiring machinery than feeling emotion, something has gone wrong. Disney consistently chooses storytelling over showing off technical capabilities, even when the engineering itself is groundbreaking. That philosophy explains why many attractions remain beloved decades after opening. They aren't remembered because they contained impressive machines. They're remembered because those machines helped create unforgettable emotional experiences. In the end, technology fades into the background while the adventure stays in your memory, which is probably the highest compliment any engineer could ever receive. 60. After all these secrets, perhaps the most surprising truth is that Disney has never relied on a single magical trick. There isn't one hidden tunnel, one special paint color, one famous castle, or one revolutionary attraction responsible for Disney's success. The real secret is accumulation. Thousands of tiny decisions, many almost invisible on their own, combine into one unforgettable experience. A carefully planted tree supports a perfectly framed photograph. A hidden speaker reinforces the atmosphere. A cast member's smile makes a child feel welcome. A subtle scent triggers a memory years later. A curved pathway creates curiosity. A piece of background music quietly changes your mood without asking permission. None of these details seem extraordinary individually. Together, they become something millions of people describe simply as Disney magic. That's why competitors can copy individual rides or technologies, yet still struggle to recreate the same emotional connection. Disney never built its reputation on one brilliant idea. It built it on thousands of thoughtful ones working together so seamlessly that guests rarely notice any of them. And perhaps that's the greatest secret Disney never wanted anyone to realize. 61 Disney quietly recycles ideas across movies and parks, but not because the company is running out of imagination. If you watch Disney films closely, you'll occasionally spot familiar animation, hidden character cameos, or visual references to older classics. The same thing happens inside the parks. A prop from one attraction may inspire a detail in another. Imagineers often include subtle callbacks to previous projects as tributes to Disney history rather than shortcuts. Sometimes a familiar silhouette appears in a mural. Other times, an old attraction is remembered through a tiny decorative object tucked into a newer ride. These references reward longtime fans without confusing first-time visitors. You don't need to recognize them to enjoy the story, but if you do, it feels like sharing an inside joke with the people who built the place. Disney understands that nostalgia grows stronger when it's earned rather than announced. Instead of constantly telling guests to remember the past, the company quietly hides pieces of its history throughout the parks and films. It creates the feeling that every generation of Disney stories belongs to one enormous connected family, even when the connection is almost invisible. 62. Some of Disney's oldest attractions continue operating because great storytelling ages better than cutting-edge technology. In a world where electronics become outdated every few years, rides like Haunted Mansion, Pirates of the Caribbean, and Peter Pan's Flight remain incredibly popular, despite opening decades ago. Their success isn't based on the newest screens or the fastest ride systems. Instead, they rely on timeless storytelling, memorable music, practical effects, and carefully designed atmosphere. Disney updates technical systems behind the scenes when necessary, but the emotional experience remains remarkably faithful to the original vision. That approach says something important about entertainment. Technology may attract attention, but story creates loyalty. Guests continue bringing children and grandchildren onto the same attractions because the experiences still feel charming, funny, mysterious, or exciting regardless of their age. Walt Disney often believed that emotion mattered more than spectacle, and these attractions prove his point every single day. The newest ride may generate the longest line this year, but the oldest rides often create the strongest family traditions because they've already become part of several generations of shared memories. 63 Disney's famous attention to detail extends all the way to the smallest sounds your shoes make while walking through the parks. Most guests never think about the pavement beneath their feet, yet different areas use different materials chosen for appearance, durability, safety, and atmosphere. Brick pathways create one feeling. Wooden boardwalks create another. Smooth stone, textured concrete, and decorative surfaces all contribute subtle changes to how a place sounds and feels. Those tiny differences help reinforce each themed environment without requiring guests to consciously analyze them. Walking across Liberty Square doesn't feel exactly like walking through Tomorrowland. Even before you notice the buildings around you, your senses begin processing the environment from the very first step. Disney understands that immersion isn't built from giant special effects alone. It comes from dozens of small sensory experiences working together. Even the simple rhythm of footsteps becomes another invisible storyteller supporting the illusion. It's remarkable how much effort goes into details most people will never intentionally notice. Yet, if those details disappeared, the parks would somehow feel less convincing, even if guests couldn't explain exactly why. 64. Every Disney vacation ends, but the company carefully designs the final moments to leave guests wanting one more visit instead of feeling exhausted. The journey back toward the exit passes familiar landmarks, inviting one last photograph or final glance at the castle. Background music softens the transition from fantasy back to reality. Shops remain open, allowing families to browse without rushing. Transportation systems continue the relaxed atmosphere, instead of abruptly ending the experience. Disney knows psychologists often talk about the importance of endings in shaping memories. People tend to remember emotional peaks and final moments more vividly than everything in between. That's one reason Disney tries to make departures feel satisfying rather than stressful whenever possible. Instead of reminding guests that the vacation is over, the park quietly encourages them to begin imagining the next visit. Children leave carrying souvenirs, parents leave carrying photographs, everyone leaves carrying stories they'll probably retell for years. That's not an accident. Disney understands that the last impression often becomes the first reason someone decides to return. 65 Walt Disney's greatest invention may not have been Mickey Mouse or Disneyland. It may have been the idea that ordinary people deserved extraordinary places. Before Disneyland opened, amusement parks often emphasized rides first and atmosphere second. Walt believed families deserved environments that were clean, welcoming, beautifully maintained, and filled with stories instead of simply mechanical attractions. That philosophy transformed entertainment around the world. Today it seems perfectly normal to expect immersive theme parks with detailed architecture, friendly employees, thoughtful landscaping, and carefully designed experiences. In the 1950s, however, those expectations were revolutionary. Walt wasn't satisfied with building another carnival. He wanted guests to feel respected from the moment they arrived until the moment they left. Decades later, that philosophy still influences every Disney project. It's easy to focus on castles, fireworks, and famous characters, but perhaps Walt's biggest legacy was raising expectations for what family entertainment could become. Millions of visitors now take those standards for granted because Disney quietly made them feel completely normal, which may be the most successful magic trick the company ever performed. 66. The biggest secret hidden inside every Disney park isn't underground behind a locked door or painted the same color as a tree. It's hidden inside the people visiting it. Watch families walking through the gates at opening time. Children race toward the castle. Parents suddenly start smiling like they're 10 years old again. Grandparents point toward attractions they remember riding decades earlier. For a few hours, everyday worries become surprisingly quiet. Deadlines, bills, emails, and traffic are replaced by pirate ships, haunted mansions, space adventures, and fairy tales. Disney creates the setting, but guests provide the final ingredient. Their excitement, memories, laughter, and imagination complete the illusion. That's why two families can visit the exact same park on the same day and leave with completely different favorite moments. The attractions matter, but the personal memories matter even more. Disney supplies the stage. Every visitor unknowingly writes a different story upon it. Perhaps that's why people keep returning. They're not trying to repeat an old vacation. They're hoping to create another unforgettable memory with the people standing beside them. 67. After looking behind the curtain, the funny thing is that Disney's greatest secret isn't really a secret anymore. Books have been written about Imagineering. Documentaries reveal backstage operations. Architects study the parks. Engineers analyze the ride systems. Fans spend years hunting hidden Mickeys and learning obscure trivia. Yet millions of people still walk through the gates every year and happily fall under the same spell. Why? Because knowing how a magician performs a trick doesn't necessarily make the performance less entertaining. Sometimes it makes you appreciate the skill even more. Disney never depended on mystery alone. It depended on craftsmanship, consistency, and thousands of talented people caring about details most guests would never consciously notice. Once you understand that, the parks become even more impressive. You stop seeing random buildings and begin seeing deliberate choices. You stop noticing only the attractions and begin noticing the invisible work connecting everything together. In the end, Disney never really wanted to hide perfection. It simply hoped you'd be having so much fun that you wouldn't stop to notice how incredibly hard that perfection was to create. After all these secrets, one question remains. Which Disney detail surprised you the most? Let me know in the comments, and if this video changed the way you'll see Disney forever, don't forget to like, subscribe, and come back for the next collection of unbelievable facts.